Have you ever wondered if there's more to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah than what you've been told? Picture this. Scientists and archaeologists working in the desert, carefully brushing away centuries of dust and sand, suddenly make a discovery that sends shockwaves through the academic world. They've found what appears to be physical evidence of two ancient cities that were wiped out by a catastrophic event so sudden and violent that it left behind layers of ash and destruction. But here's where it gets interesting. What if everything we thought we knew about why these cities were destroyed was completely wrong? For thousands of years, this story has been told as a simple tale of moral failure and divine punishment. But what if the real reason runs much deeper? What if this ancient story isn't just about personal wrongdoing, but actually reveals something far more unsettling about human society itself? As we sit here in our modern world, surrounded by technology and progress, could we be unknowingly repeating the same dangerous patterns that led to the destruction of these legendary cities? The answer might surprise you, and it just might change how you see both history and yourself. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah stands as one of the most powerful and mysterious accounts in the Bible. Found in the book of Genesis, this tale has captured human imagination for thousands of years. These weren't just any ordinary cities. They were said to be completely destroyed by fire and brimstone, wiped off the face of the earth by what many believe was an act of God Himself. But what makes this story so captivating that it continues to fascinate people across cultures and centuries? The destruction of these cities is often held up as the ultimate warning against immorality. Yet, as we'll discover, the real story is far more complex and thought-provoking than a simple tale of good versus evil. Different people interpret this story in vastly different ways. Some see it as being about personal choices and individual behavior. Others point to broader themes of social injustice and the oppression of the vulnerable. The story raises deep questions about right and wrong, about mercy and justice, and about what it truly means to be human. Beyond its religious importance, this ancient tale has left its mark on popular culture in countless ways. It's been depicted in movies, written about in books, and portrayed in art throughout history. Usually, it's painted as a shocking story of destruction and moral decline. But could there be layers to this narrative that we've been missing? Could it serve as a warning for our own modern society, highlighting dangerous patterns that still exist today? When most people hear the names Sodom and Gomorrah, certain images immediately come to mind. Raging fires consuming everything in sight, divine anger raining down from heaven, and a culture completely consumed by sin. These cities have become symbols of immorality and punishment, used as cautionary tales in both religious and everyday conversations. But here's where things get complicated. The problem starts with how this story is often oversimplified. Many people interpret the destruction of these cities as a blanket condemnation of personal immorality, focusing particularly on specific types of wrongdoing. However, when we take a closer, more careful look at the actual biblical text, we discover that the issues at play were far more complex and layered than most people realize. Sodom and Gomorrah weren't just about individual people making bad choices. They represented something much bigger and more troubling, the complete breakdown of society on a massive scale. Issues like unchecked pride, a complete lack of hospitality towards strangers, and widespread injustice are mentioned in various interpretations of the story. But these deeper layers are often completely overlooked in favor of more sensationalized accounts that focus on the dramatic destruction. This oversimplification creates real challenges for modern people trying to understand the story. Many focus solely on what they call sins of the flesh, interpreting the story as being only about sexual immorality. But in doing so, they miss the broader and perhaps more important implications about societal corruption and the neglect of vulnerable people. Here's something that might shock you. The prophet Ezekiel later clarified that Sodom's sins included arrogance, greed, and failing to care for the poor and needy. This completely changes how we should understand the story. It's not just about personal behavior, it's about how entire communities can become so focused on themselves that they forget their responsibility to others. Another challenge we face is the enormous cultural and historical distance between us and these ancient events. Sodom and Gomorrah existed in a world completely different from ours, where ancient Middle Eastern practices and customs shaped every aspect of daily life. Understanding what really happened to these cities requires us to look far beyond a surface-level reading of the text. What were these cities actually like before their destruction? How did their practices and policies reflect their moral condition? Without understanding this historical context, it's incredibly easy to misinterpret or even misuse the story to support modern ideas that may completely miss the heart of the original message. To truly understand what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, we need to explore the historical, cultural, and spiritual world in which these cities existed. Their names have become synonymous with sin and destruction, but beneath the surface lies a much richer narrative filled with lessons about human behavior, societal values, and divine justice. Sodom and Gomorrah were part of a region the Bible calls the cities of the plain, most likely located near what we now know as the Dead Sea. The geographical details in Genesis describe this area as extremely fertile and prosperous, like the garden of the Lord. This beautiful setting suggests that these cities were once thriving centers of trade and agriculture, full of opportunity and abundance. But here's where things get interesting. Prosperity often comes with its own set of problems. In Sodom and Gomorrah, wealth and success seem to have fostered arrogance, greed, and moral decay rather than gratitude or a sense of responsibility toward others. The Bible portrays the citizens of these cities as guilty of serious sins, but what exactly were these offenses? Common interpretations emphasize sexual immorality, particularly focusing on Genesis chapter 19, where the men of Sodom demand to abuse Lot's angelic visitors. However, reducing the entire story to this single event neglects much broader societal issues that were plaguing these communities. Other parts of Scripture, such as Ezekiel 16 verses 49 to 50, expand on the sins of Sodom, pointing to pride, excessive luxury, complacency, and a failure to care for the poor and needy. These cities had become cultures of selfishness and injustice, where vulnerable people were exploited or simply ignored, and where hospitality, which was considered a sacred duty in the ancient Middle East, was flagrantly disregarded. You see, hospitality in ancient times wasn't just about being polite or friendly. It was a moral and spiritual obligation. Travelers, strangers, and people in need relied completely on the generosity of others for survival in a harsh and dangerous environment. The violent and inhumane behavior of Sodom's citizens toward Lot's guests symbolized a much deeper corruption of societal values. By rejecting and threatening those who had come under their protection, the people of Sodom displayed a level of moral depravity that went far beyond personal failings. It was a complete betrayal of divine principles by an entire community. This brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of this story. Archaeological and historical research has added another intriguing layer to our understanding. Some scholars suggest that Sodom and Gomorrah were real cities that met a catastrophic end, possibly due to natural disasters like a massive earthquake or even a meteor strike. These events could explain the fire and brimstone imagery described in the Bible. Others view the narrative as a theological parable, emphasizing moral and spiritual truths rather than focusing on historical accuracy. Both perspectives highlight something important: the timeless nature of the story's warnings about societal corruption and divine accountability. The role of Abraham in this narrative further deepens the story's exploration of justice and mercy. In Genesis chapter 18, Abraham actually pleads with God to spare the cities if even a handful of righteous people can be found within them. This negotiation reveals God's character as both just and compassionate, willing to extend mercy if even a small remnant of faithful people remains. However, the absence of such righteousness in Sodom and Gomorrah underscores their complete moral collapse. The story challenges modern people to reflect on their own communities and values. Are we fostering justice, compassion, and humility? Or are we falling into the same patterns of arrogance, neglect, and exploitation that led to the destruction of these ancient cities? The story of Sodom and Gomorrah reaches its dramatic and unforgettable climax when divine judgment is finally executed upon these cities. This pivotal moment is not only the most intense part of the narrative, but also one that radically shifts our understanding of the events leading to their destruction and what they symbolize for us today. As the sun rises over the city of Sodom, the angelic visitors who had come under Lot's protection the night before urgently instruct Lot and his family to flee. The angels warn them not to look back as they escape, emphasizing the irreversible nature of the coming judgment. This creates a moment of incredible tension. Lot and his family are caught between the impending wrath of God and the comfort and familiarity of the city they called home. The urgency of the angel's warning reflects the immediacy of divine action, but it also raises profound questions. Why did the judgment have to be so absolute? Why couldn't these cities be reformed or given another chance? The Bible describes the destruction in vivid detail. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. This catastrophic imagery has often been interpreted as divine retribution, but its deeper meaning lies in what it reveals about the nature of God and humanity. First, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah serves as a divine response to unchecked wickedness. Throughout the Bible, God's judgment is portrayed as not only punitive but also corrective, meant to serve as a warning to others. The fire and brimstone that rained down upon these cities were a dramatic display of God's intolerance for injustice, corruption, and inhumanity. But it's also important to note the complete absence of even a small remnant of righteousness in these cities. Abraham's earlier negotiation with God to spare the cities for the sake of just 10 righteous people highlights God's willingness to extend mercy. The fact that no such righteous individuals could be found demonstrates the total moral decay of these societies. The climax also centers on one of the most haunting moments in the entire narrative: Lot's wife and her tragic decision to look back as the cities are being destroyed. Her transformation into a pillar of salt has become one of the most memorable and discussed aspects of the story. This moment is often seen as a symbol of disobedience, attachment to sin, or an inability to let go of the past. It reminds us that divine instructions, no matter how difficult to comprehend, carry profound significance. Her fate serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of lingering in places or mindsets that God calls us to leave behind. For Lot and his daughters, the escape represents both a physical and spiritual journey. Their survival signifies a moment of divine grace, but it also leaves them with the weight of witnessing such a devastating event. This duality reflects the broader message of the story. God's justice is absolute, but His mercy is extended to those who heed His call. This climactic moment forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about humanity's potential for evil and the consequences of collective sin. It also challenges us to reflect on our own lives and society. Do we, like Lot's wife, find ourselves tempted to look back, clinging to what God has called us to leave behind? Or can we move forward in faith, trusting in God's plan and His call to righteousness? The story challenges modern people to examine their own communities and values. Are we living in ways that honor God's call for justice, kindness, and humility? Are we caring for the vulnerable and welcoming strangers? Or are we becoming like the citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah, focused only on our own prosperity and comfort while ignoring the needs of others? Ultimately, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is more than a moment of divine wrath. It's a turning point that underscores the need for justice, accountability, and an unwavering commitment to live according to God's principles. It stands as a timeless reminder of the dangers of moral complacency and the transformative power of obedience to God's will. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is one of the Bible's most profound and sobering accounts, carrying lessons that resonate far beyond its ancient context. At its core, the narrative is a powerful reminder of the consequences of unchecked wickedness and the importance of living a life aligned with God's principles. It's not just a tale of judgment, it's a call to self-reflection, accountability, and transformation. We began by uncovering the common misconceptions surrounding these infamous cities. Were they destroyed solely because of specific sins, or is the lesson more nuanced, highlighting a culture of pervasive injustice and inhumanity? The story challenges us to dig deeper into the reasons behind God's actions and consider how the absence of righteousness shaped their fate. In the climactic moments, we witness the harrowing destruction, the urgency of divine warnings, and the tragic loss of Lot's wife. These events explore themes of obedience, grace, and the consequences of clinging to a sinful past. The story serves as both a warning and an invitation, a warning about the dangers of moral decay, and an invitation to choose a different path. Sodom and Gomorrah's tale isn't just about the past, it's a mirror for our own times. Are we living in ways that honor God's call for justice, kindness, and humility? Are we building communities that care for the vulnerable and welcome strangers? Or are we unknowingly following the same patterns that led to the destruction of these ancient cities? The story invites us to choose righteousness over complacency, transformation over destruction. It challenges us to examine not just our personal behavior, but the broader patterns of our society. Are we fostering justice and compassion, or are we allowing pride, greed, and indifference to take root in our communities? This narrative reminds us that divine judgment is not arbitrary or cruel, but a response to the absence of justice and mercy in human society. It calls us to be different, to be better, to be the kind of people who would have been counted among the righteous if we had lived in those ancient cities. What do you think about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah? Does it challenge the way you see justice and mercy in your own life? Does it make you think differently about the responsibilities we have toward our communities and the vulnerable people around us? This ancient tale continues to speak to us today because the human condition hasn't changed. We still face the same temptations toward selfishness, the same tendency to ignore the needs of others, and the same potential for both great good and terrible evil. The question is, which path will we choose? If this exploration of Sodom and Gomorrah has given you new insights or challenged your thinking, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspect of this story resonates most with you? How do you see its lessons applying to our modern world? Don't forget to like this video if it's helped you understand this complex and important story in a new way. Subscribe for more in-depth explorations of biblical narratives and their relevance to our lives today. And please, leave a comment sharing your perspective. These ancient stories come alive when we discuss them together and learn from each other's insights. Until next time, may we all strive to be counted among the righteous, building communities of justice, mercy, and love.